Welcome to the NFL MVP Momentum Podcast. I'm Sam Holcroft alongside Payton Thompson. Before we begin, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP, follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the trade deadline and our overall reactions to it, and we're also going to give our recap, overreaction Mondays, and our picks, double downs, and upsets. So, first off, I'm going to recap PT. What a week. That's a lot of green right there. After a not so stellar week, we turned it around here. You know, all of us had a fairly good week. Starting with Zeke. Zeke's still at the top of the leaderboard. He had the worst week out of all of us. I believe he went, I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He went 9-7 last week. Did get his double down. Did not get the upset. He's at 94 points with a 78-45 record. I climbed to second. I had, that's 12-4. Yeah, 12-4 record. Got my double down and my upset as per usual. I have 92 points with a 75-48 record. PT, you climbed to third, having the best record this last week, 13-3. Also getting your double down and upset, which really helps. That puts you at 91 points, 1 point behind me, but you have the best record at 80-43. And then Sean went from second to fourth. He had a record of 10-6. Got his double down correct. All of us got our double downs for the second time this year, but he did not get the upset. So he's at 89 points with a 77-46 record. So moving on to our overreaction Mondays. PT, you can go ahead and start with Zeke's overreaction.
Yeah, so this is something that Zeke told me a couple days ago, about how he feels about the Eagles offense and A.J. Brown. But he said that he thinks A.J. Brown, well, first he said that he thought that A.J. Brown was the first best receiver in the NFL, the best receiver right now. And I had a little discussion with him, and I said, well, it's pretty hard to beat out Tyreek Hill, what he's doing in Miami right now. So he's like, well, that's pretty fair. With how explosive that offense has been. So he agreed that A.J. Brown is probably the second best receiver right now. And to be honest with you, the way that he explained it with injuries happening, how current seasons are going, it's kind of hard to disagree that A.J. Brown is at not minimum, top 3, top 4. I think it'd be a little bit, it's a little bit hard to put him that high because I don't know if he's, I guess, the type of, how do I want to say this? It's just not really a guy that you would expect to be in that kind of conversation. I think if everyone was healthy, which, obviously it's the NFL, it's never going to happen. But if everyone's healthy, he's probably somewhere 5 or 6 range. But as of right now, he's had a great season. I think he's had 525-yard games, I think was the stat that he brought up. So it's pretty impressive. Obviously, the Eagles are, they're fighting in some really tough games, but they're winning games. So, top of the NFC, they're probably, as of right now, the NFC favorite to come out of the NFC. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that he's not up there.
Yeah, like you said, A.J. Brown could be a 5 to 6 guy, but he's the second best receiver in the league right now, as what Zeke's saying. But that's also with being on a run first team.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's a valid overreaction. My overreaction for the week is the Jaguars will be the 1 seed in the AFC. Now, let me ask you real fast. We're going to talk about the Bills for a second. The Bills have the Bengals. They have another meeting with the Jets. Who knows how that can go down. The Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and the Dolphins. That's 6 relatively tough games for the Bills. The Dolphins, they have the Chiefs, the Raiders. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. No.
Go ahead and put a W on the record book for that one.
Yeah, we might as well. The Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Bills. Maybe, and they play the Jets twice, so that counts as like 1 because they can be tricky. So that's a lot of tough games for the Dolphins. The Chiefs, they have the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Bills, the Bengals, and the Chargers, who also played them very well. That's some tough games. The Jaguars, their tough games remaining. They have the 49ers after a bye week, the Bengals in prime time, and the Ravens. Everyone else is either 500 or below. Well, why not? Why can't the Jaguars be the 1 seed? Are they playing like it? They're starting to kind of play like it. They had a rough start. The first 3 games weren't pretty, but the last 5 have been fairly good. So that's my overreaction.
Yeah, I would say, to be honest with you, I think the only real team they have to worry about is the Dolphins, because I think the Dolphins want to solidify themselves as the 1 seed. They want to get that bye. Because, to be honest with you, I think on paper, starting the season, the AFC is pretty loaded. I mean, and it still is I mean, obviously it's the better conference. It's still a pretty stacked conference. There's a lot of talent there, as far as the quarterback, wide receiver, and defense goes. But I got to be honest, it's like, I feel like the Chiefs, obviously they lost the game against the Broncos this last week, and I don't think people were expecting that to happen, but I think they're going to bounce back nicely. I think they're just one of those teams where they don't really feel like they need to get the 1 seed to be successful in the playoffs. So I don't think they're necessarily going to push for that. I think if anything, they're going to start resting guys towards the end of the season. They know they're going to make the playoffs in that division. Um, and then as far as the Bills, it just seems like they find ways to beat themselves every week. Whether it's a good team, whether it's a bad team, 500 doesn't matter. It just seems like they're off this season, and that's kind of been a trend for them. So I'm not really too worried about those 2 teams. And as far as the other teams that you mentioned, the Chargers, not really too worried about them. They lack a lot of core principles for an elite team, especially in that conference. I think the Ravens in situations can be good, but they're way too hot and cold for me. So yeah, it really just comes down to the Dolphins, because I think the Dolphins have looked the best outside of the other teams that we've mentioned. So yeah, I like it, to be honest. I think it's a decent bet. I don't know if I'd bet on it, but I think the Jaguars have, they're starting to hit their stride, and then also, like you said, their schedule is one of the easier, so it's a good bet.
Yep. So PT,
So we're gonna
what's
flip to
yours?
the Yeah, we're gonna flip to the NFC here, and it's kind of contrasting, Zeke's perspective and with AJ Brown and with how he feels about the Eagles. Um, I still think the Cowboys are gonna win the division. I think I had this take earlier in the season before when we did the season predictions. And you know what? I'm sticking with it. I think the Cowboys right now. I think they're a good football team. I just don't know if they're going to be an elite football team. I think they're just one of the weirder teams out there where they can look really good for a couple weeks, 3 weeks in a row sometimes, and then they just have a complete goose egg against a team that they should not lose to. Think of the Cardinals. I know. I mean, I think the other games they've lost have been relatively against like good teams. Um, but I will say when they play good teams, they usually play up to those expectations and make it a good game. They just have to avoid the trap games. It's always the trap games with them. But as far as their offense, I mean, CeeDee Lamb had an explosion last week, um, with multiple touchdowns and I believe 100 and I think it was 170, 150 yards. He had a great game. Tony Pollard has been what they wanted as a starter. Their defense is still top 5 in the league. I think when they have their wins, they just look a little bit more dominant than the Eagles, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. Now, am I saying they're going to go further than the Eagles in the playoffs? No, not really, because I think they're just also one of those teams that they hit a matchup in the playoffs, and then things just seem to fall apart every year for them. So I wouldn't take them to make it out of the NFC or anything like that, but I still have them taking that bye because if you look at the difference of record between them and the Eagles, they're not that far behind. I think Cowboys are 5-2 and the Eagles are 7-1. So it would just take a couple games, in the next several weeks to get that 1 seed, and I really wouldn't be too surprised. So yeah, that's my overreaction.
Yeah, I just find it tough to believe that the Cowboys can still win this division. But I mean, it all starts with this week. Like the Cowboys have the defense, like you said. The Eagles just let their opponents hang around too much, and although that Cowboys offense is still very shaky, the Cowboys is a team that you can't let hang around. So I think them winning the division is an overreaction, but it's definitely plausible.
Hmm.
So Sean's overreaction for the week is the Chiefs offense needs Taylor Swift to be in the building. Now this is kind of a little bit of a troll, but it could be true. It could be an overreaction. Yeah, they were god awful on Sunday. Had 5 total turnovers, 3 fumbles lost, 2 interceptions by Patrick Mahomes, 3 of 10 on third down efficiencies, 1 for 3 on fourth down. They had 8 less plays than the Broncos, yet they had 35 more yards. Broncos only threw for 87 yards. Their yards per play was 1.1 more than the Broncos. So, I mean, other than the turnovers, they outplayed them. And they had to kick 3 field goals. The last time that the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes did not score a touchdown has been over 2 years ago. And that was at Tennessee when they lost 27-3. And that was the only time that year. So I didn't bother to check the second or third time that that's ever happened, but it hasn't happened much to Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelce. So yeah, I think the Chiefs needed Taylor Swift in the building because, after the Broncos won, they played Shake It Off. So, uh, yeah, that's Sean's overreaction for the week.
So you're agreeing with the overreaction.
Oh, yeah. They needed her.
Yeah, I don't think I need to say too much about this overreaction. I think it's a big overreaction. I mean they've won a Super Bowl, so I'm not really too worried about it. I don't know. To be honest with you, I know like the media and the players and whoever. I mean, no, I can't really say players. I should really say like maybe analysts, but mainly the media. I think are really infatuated with this Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce thing, and I'm just pretty disinterested with it. To be honest with you. So I don't think it means too much. I think this is just kind of a funny overreaction. Chiefs will be just fine.
Well, PT, can you even name 3 Taylor Swift songs?
No, I couldn't. That's
No.
probably why I'm
Well, see,
disinterested.
that's why you're disinterested. There you
Maybe if
go.
it was maybe if it was a different artist or if it was a different player. But I'm not too interested in the Chiefs, not too interested in Taylor Swift. So
All right. So now we'll move on to the trade deadline reactions. PT, I'm not really a fan of this trade deadline. Nothing really happened that I was like, "Ooh, this team's winning the Super Bowl." I think
hmm
the biggest trade that happened today wasn't even in football. It was the Clippers trade in basketball,
yeah.
and but we can start with probably the most impactful, and that is Chase Young to the 49ers. So, what was when you heard that Chase Young was getting dealt? What team were you thinking he was going to go to, and then your reaction when he went to the Niners?
Well, for starters, I don't think it's the most impactful trade. I think it's probably two or three. In my opinion, I think it's Kevin Byard to the Eagles, but we'll get to him in a second. But I think my biggest reaction to that was, you pair him, and then you also pair the Randy Gregory trade, also going to San Francisco. You can kind of throw him in there with this. They're really just bulking up on pass rush. I think sometimes I mean, I shouldn't say sometimes. I think specifically this year, they're really scared of hitting the injury bug late in the season, and that could really derail your whole defense. You miss your pass rush, that automatically makes your secondary a lot worse, and that's kind of their like when you think of the 49ers, I think you think of C-Mac, but the whole, in my opinion, the whole foundation of the team relies on the defense to make sure that the offense has time to rest, time to recoup. And so, with that being said, you get a guy in Chase Young who's a young, explosive pass rusher. Obviously, he's had his injury issues in the past, but to get him for a third round pick is pretty valuable because I think, obviously you have gems there in the third round that you can hit on, but I think we can both agree Chase Young is worth at least a second probably. And so, obviously we don't know as much as the GMs. I'm thinking the reason why that he didn't go for higher price is because he has had injury issues in the past, and teams are a little bit afraid of that. but you get a guy that's young on a really cheap contract for a third round pick, and it just seems like there's not really much downfall for that. Or much downside, I should say. It really just seems like a big upside move for them, and he goes to a really good team who has good mentors and Nick Bosa and other guys on the defensive line and defense. So I like the move a lot, and to add Randy Gregory on that line as well, it's a good depth piece. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah. And the reason he probably didn't go too high is because this is the last year of his deal, but there is a fifth, I think it's a team option or a potential player option.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not
It's
seeing here.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so like I think that's why he didn't go for much higher because like, if he was locked in for 4 years, that's a first round, a second round, and then who knows, maybe like another fourth or something, depending on that. But it's considering that this could be just a 1 year rental, just for the season, I think the trade value that they gave up is probably going to be well worth it. But yeah, then you have Randy Gregory, and then that they acquired via trade. But also, you got to keep in mind they still got Nick Bosa. Like all three of
Mhm.
those guys on there, like I don't even think you need a fourth guy. Like that's an insane pass rush as is. I don't know who's going to be moving to the interior or if they're going to have Randy play more of like a actual linebacker role, but
Mm.
we'll definitely see. But I think them having a bye week right now really helps too, because then Chase Young can get acclimated to the team, the scheme, and then they face the Jaguars, I believe, in 2 weeks. Like they could be they could be well ready for him. But you said probably the most impactful was the Kevin Byard.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that one actually didn't happen on the trade deadline. That happened a few days ago. But that was a move that we saw coming. I believe, I don't know if we talked about it on air or not, but we were talking about how the Eagles need someone in that secondary. It's because like they're missing Cam Gardner Johnson um, from last year. Like it's been evident their secondary hasn't been looking the same. Darius Slay kind of is not doing so hot. I believe Bradbury is still there, or did he leave? I'm not too
I don't
sure.
know for sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Um, but like they needed someone in that secondary, and I think Bayard is a good pickup, especially because the Titans were selling, and then of course they start Will Levison. They beat the Falcons, so like who knows what they're going to be doing now. Um, but yeah, I think that this pickup for the Eagles is very, very good. I think it kind of helps them keep the edge in the division and potentially even the NFC. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Kevin Byard for me, I really like his run support game. But I think overall he's just a very good veteran safety that you can count on to be a good tackler. And kind of be a guy that the guys can lean on, kind of be that captain in the secondary, Um, and obviously, I mean, I think their secondary, in my opinion, is pretty good, but I think this just solidifies their secondary as far as, you know, that kind of up top leadership, but also having a guy that can kind of be the captain of the field, that quarterback on the defense. So, yeah, I like it a lot. He's a good tackler. He kind of reminds me of a kind of like a Jesse Bates. He's going to be all around the field. He's going to control that defense, kind of get them in spots where they need to be the backline guy who can kind of see things develop. But yeah, I really like his run support game. I think he's a really good tackler. And I think it's a guy that, to be honest, the Titans didn't want to let go, but they knew that it was probably just time. And so, yeah, and getting him for only a fifth and sixth round exchange is pretty good value as well. So, yeah, I like the trade for them.
Yeah. So what's another one that you liked on this trade deadline day?
It's gonna kind of be a weird one because I don't think that if Kirk Cousins doesn't get hurt, then we probably aren't talking about it. And if Josh Dobbs doesn't have a pretty decent season start with the Cardinals, he probably doesn't get traded either. But I think getting Josh Dobbs over there in Minnesota to hold the ship down for at least the rest of the year, um, I don't really know their plans as far as after this year because Kirk is up for contract. I don't know, and with his injury, I don't know how it's going to affect the contract and things like that. But I think Josh Dobbs is a guy you can count on to be competent. You can count on him to make the right plays in the right situations. He's not going to have the athletic profile that you want to say, we want this guy for next year, the year after that, or anything like that. But I think it's a guy that you can bring Justin Jefferson back. You can get your guys healthy, TJ Hawkinson on the right track, and kind of just not let the ship sink, if you will. And so yeah, I like it for that. But I don't really know what their plan is after this year. But this trade kind of tells me that they're not completely sold on being out of the playoffs. That's what it tells me.
Yeah. But what it also tells me is there was no other team that was willing to give up a quarterback
Hmm.
that Minnesota could have given up enough that they would have been like, okay, let's go do this.
Yeah.
Maybe if they didn't lose Eric Kendricks, maybe if they were a little bit more ready on defense for the playoffs, maybe they would have went out and tried to get like a Ryan Tannehill if he wasn't injured, or like this potentially could have been Kyler Murray also if he wasn't injured. Like the top candidates, like for a quarterback trade right now, are injured. Justin Fields probably wouldn't have happened considering that they are interdivision. But yeah, I think it just shows that no other quarterbacks that were available for trade um, were really available, or Minnesota just didn't want to give up enough. But I think that Josh Dobbs could be just enough for you to keep this ship afloat. Let your playmakers like Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson keep you in games. But this is where Alexander Madison and Cam Akers are going to have to step up. I mean, and
Hmm.
on here as well, Cam Akers, got traded earlier this year. So they need to get this going because Josh Dobbs isn't going to be. Kirk Cousins, I'm pretty sure, averaged over 300 yards per game when he got injured, passing wise. And, you know, Josh Dobbs, you can't ask him, even though you have Justin Jefferson, who can easily average like 110. You have Jordan Addison, who's been averaging almost 100 a game. You can't just be like, hey, buddy, I know you just got here. You're going to be playing only a few snaps this next game, but the next game, we need you to throw for 300 and 300 from here on out. That's not happening.
Hmm.
So the run game is going to have to step up for sure. But I do like that Minnesota didn't just fold and be like, you know what, we're just going to go get a quarterback in this next draft. But they feel like that they can still compete even though their defense isn't playing good. But I think Josh Dobbs is probably the best that they could have gotten without giving up an arm and a leg.
Yeah. Let's talk about a trade that I feel like doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't think the Montez Sweat trade to the Bears makes a whole ton of sense. I like Montez Sweat as a player. That's a guy that I wanted the Falcons to try to target for, a third, um, possibly, a fourth and a third. I would have probably done that too. But I think he's a guy that's in his prime. He's a good pass rusher. I don't think he's not elite, but he's not, average. I think he's closer to being a top 15 guy versus, top 35, 40. So, I think he's a really good young, or not, I shouldn't say young. That's kind of the point of why I don't like the trade. I think he's a good player, but to give up a second round pick that is going to be pretty high because you're not a very good football team doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a 27-year-old pass rusher when, if we're being honest, like I don't think the Bears are like all that bad on defense. I don't think they're good. I don't think they're even average. But I don't think they're so bad that one guy that's not an elite pass rusher isn't gonna fix for a second round pick that is gonna be high. And so from that respect, it just doesn't really make sense why the Bears are trying to buy right now when they should be selling. Um, and for Montez Sweat to go from the Commanders, who are a pretty uncertain football team, better than the Bears to having to go to the Bears, who really don't have much direction either. You got to kind of feel for him too, because he's kind of, you know, basically just going from one team that didn't have a future to one team that doesn't have a future when he's in his prime. It's not what you really want to do at that respect to your career. So yeah, just overall, this trade kind of made me, scratch my head a little bit. But as far as the player, I like Montez Sweat a lot.
Yeah, so I think I kind of know what they're thinking. So there's a team right now that is over 500 that has a bad offense, but has a good defense, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think the Bears are like, you know what? In the NFC, if we could be the Steelers of the NFC, we can make the playoffs next year. So how do we do that? We get our defense better, and you know what? If we get the 1 seed, we get Caleb Williams. Sure, we'll have a rookie, but if we have the number 2 pick, we can get Marvin Harrison Jr. And or maybe we still have Justin Fields. Who knows what they do? Maybe they don't get the 1 pick and Arizona does, or whatever. But they're just thinking like maybe we can get our offense just good enough that our defense can help lead us to the playoffs next year. Because who knows? Minnesota next year could be bad. Packers next year could be bad. Lions are still going to win that division. NFC South, who knows what can happen next year? We don't even know what's going to happen this year, except for the Panthers being bad. The West, anyone can go up and down next year. Like Brock Purdy could have a horrible year next year, and then that defense gets hit with the injury bug. Like anything can happen in the NFC. So I think what they're doing is that was a move for next year. Yes, they should have been a selling team, but if they feel like they're just those 2 pieces away from making the playoffs, making that jump that they wanted to make, then I don't mind it. It is a little weird because I feel like there's a team that probably could have used them a little bit more. Like you said, the Falcons. You might have been able to get a little bit more out of the Falcons just because they are a little bit more desperate to make the playoffs. So you probably could have gotten like a second and maybe a fourth.
Yeah, or
You
maybe
know,
even a third, possibly
maybe even
like
yeah.
an
If
extra
the
third. Yeah.
like if the Falcons were really that desperate, like they probably could have given that up if they wanted to try to win the division and get some momentum going this year. But that's kind of like my take on the Montez Sweat, just because defense. I mean, they're I wouldn't say set, but they're definitely better off than their offense is. And
hmm
I don't think that you necessarily needed to be buying for the offense right now when you're trying to tank. Whereas the defense, you can try to get that going a little bit more.
Yeah, so just to touch up on that, do you think that getting a defensive pass rusher, do you think that hurts their tank? Because that would be my only thing with it, is like if you were trying to tank, or even if you're not trying to tank, getting a guy that you're trading a second round pick for that's gonna be high, and then also might push you out of like the top 5 at the end of the year, it's a little bit much. I
So
I, I could have maybe understood for like I don't know, a little bit. I don't know.
I would say probably I don't think it would hurt too bad just because their offense is real bad. They have DJ Moore. Darnell Mooney has been almost non existent except for like 2 games this year. They have Tyler Badgett, I think his name is,
hmm
starting. Justin Fields is going to be out for a while. They're probably just going to end up holding Justin Fields out for a little bit. But I mean, their schedule, they have the Saints, the Panthers, which could be a winnable game, the Lions, the Vikings, the Lions, the Browns, uh, the Cardinals, which could be a winnable game, the Falcons and the Packers, which realistically, all of those games, except for the Cardinals and Panthers, even with Montez Sweat and even if them trying to win, they probably don't. So I think that they were like, you know what, this is like, because like I don't think they're done yet. They still got some cap room to play with. And they went out and got some people. I did like what they did this last offseason.
hmm
So I think that they're expecting to have another good offseason, another good draft. Oh, sorry, not a good draft because they drafted Darnell Wright at 10. Didn't like that. But I think like they're planning because they're going to have 2 first-round picks, probably both of those within the top 3 potentially.
Hmm.
Which even then, I guess what's funny? What I just realized, they can beat the Panthers and not even care because they own the Panthers pick.
Yeah, I mean,
So
situationally, or they could lose and not care too.
yeah,
You
it's
know, either
the
it's a
the
win-win
worst
pretty much.
the worst thing is a tie because then the
Yeah.
Cardinals can just lose out and then they get the one.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's just kind of my take on the Montez Sweat trade.
Uh, I think I don't know if there's anyone specific you want to touch up on. There's one guy I kind of want to touch on here. Um, you know, it might be out of the blue a little bit, but I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is a player that I think can be better in a different situation. He's still really young. He's 24 years old. He had 860 yards last year in a really run heavy offense where, for the better part of, 9 games, they didn't even have their starting quarterback. And I think he's a guy that you can depend on. I think that's a guy, or I think that's someone that's a guy that Detroit was looking for. A dependable guy that's not gonna he's not gonna burn you or anything like that. I mean, he has decent vertical, stretching. He can stretch the field vertically fine, but it's gonna be a guy that has secure hands when you give him opportunities. He's also from Michigan as well, so it kind of just makes sense with the ties as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, I like the deal with them because I don't know if I really see a guy on that offense. I mean, I guess it's Amon St. Brown, right? But I don't outside of him, I don't know if I see another guy that, you can really depend on to give you, dependability for the rest of the season at that position. I know Jamison Williams was supposed to be that guy. He's had issues with drops all season. Um, and so, you don't really know if he's going to be your next guy. Um, Craig Reynolds has been decent, but I don't know if that's the answer there. But he's been solid. But I think at worst it's just another guy that you can at least get in your offense, get acclimated before you make the playoffs. Hopefully in that division you should. I feel like at this point. Um, and so I don't really think there was much downside with this deal. I think it was a good move.
Yeah, Donovan Peoples Jones is a very good. I think he's like a low 2, high 3 in most
Hmm.
systems, and he could play whichever in this offense. Whether they want him to be behind Jameson or in front of him, it doesn't really matter. Um, but I think since this is a run first team, and last night against the Raiders kind of proved like even Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery don't matter. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to run the ball good. Um, and then we have Jared Goff, who can still make some good plays. You got Amon St. Brown, who is really solidified as potentially a top 15, maybe this year top 10 wide receiver in the league. So I think like this is a trade like not saying this was the missing piece because they're still very young on defense, but another reliable guy because if Amon St. Brown gets double teamed every play, who are you throwing it to? Jameson's dropping the ball. You can't rely on Reynolds all too often. Sam Laporta is good, but if he goes down with an injury because he takes a lot of hits as a tight end, you know, I think getting that extra guy, it was the safer move, and I don't think they really gave up too much for him. I think it was just like a 4th round.
Yeah, it was a middle pick, I think.
Yeah, so I like this for Detroit.
Is there anybody else you wanted to touch on?
No, I don't think Hardman is necessarily something really spectacular for Kansas City, and no one else I really kind of saw that really made me go like, oh yeah, they needed that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I like Leonard Williams, but I don't think he's gonna take that defense to a new high or anything like that. He'll be a solid starter for them.
Yeah, so all right, so then that wraps up that. So we'll go ahead and move on to our upsets, double downs, and picks. So starting with Zeke's upset of the week, we got the Bears over the Saints. Where's that one? So only one person disagreed with the other three here, and that's Zeke. So I'm going with the Saints just because I trust in the Saints. Uh, you know, I believe did they win last week?
Yes,
Yeah,
against the
yep, they
Colts.
beat the Colts. I just think that this Saints team is just going to be too good. It's at home, so they don't have to play in cold weather. Which if this was on the road, maybe I agree because Derek Carr can't really play good on the road in the cold. So yeah, I like the Saints here.
Yeah, yeah, same. I think specifically, I mean, I think the Saints have always, I mean, this season and historically have had a pretty good defense, but their offense seems to be catching a little bit more rhythm now that they've had Kamara back a few more weeks. And Kamara has been such a help to this offense, not only being a check down guy, but kind of returning to his old form, being really elusive, being able to get an open space. So, yeah, I think they've looked really good since he's been back.
Yeah, and then this was also your double down, so another conflict of interest here,
hmm
um, and going with the Saints here. So like, yeah, I like that. My upset of the week is the Dolphins over the Chiefs. It's a pretty slim upset considering that the Chiefs just lost to the Broncos, but uh, you and Sean also going with the Dolphins here, and Zeke actually going with the Chiefs. This would have been one that I would have thought the Dolphins, but it's hard to see Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelsey have two bad games in a row. You know, but this could be a little bit weird. This game is in Germany, so I think anything can happen here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it would have been fine to I think it would have been fine to pick either team. I just think the Dolphins have a little bit more momentum right now.
Yeah. Peyton, you're upset for the week.
Yeah, I got the Rams over the Packers. I think the biggest thing about this game for me is it's going to depend on if Matthew Stafford is healthy or not, and I'm just not certain if he is or not. Um, but I think if he is, I just think the Packers have regressed so much offensively these past few weeks that for me, I think it's easy to for the Rams to have one of those games where they kind of it's kind of funny because last week they got steamrolled, but I think this is a game where they could steamroll the Packers. I think if Matthew Stafford is healthy, Cooper Kupp finally has his legs under him. Um, Puka, if he's healthy, he's also questionable this weekend. So, um, I think it's a game that they could win by a lot. But it's also a game that they might lose if they don't have their guys in position. So, but I think if they're healthy, I think it's a good pick.
Yeah. I'm actually going with the Packers here, and so is Zeke. Sean's going with the Rams with you. I just think that the question mark of Stafford, like what are they really playing for? Like playoffs could have been an option, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, even. But now it's kind of like, you know what? Let's just take our good pick. Let's kind of just feel the rest of the season out. Maybe we can get a good offseason and be relevant again next year. No need to rush Stafford back, especially if he can't throw the ball 100%. It's going to be cold in Green Bay. So I just think that everything's kind of pointing towards the Packers, even though I think the Rams are the better team. Sean's upset for the week is the Bengals over the Bills. And only one person is disagreeing here. And once again, it's Zeke, the man who's disagreed the most out of all of us. But can't diss him because he's on top of the leaderboard.
hmm
We're all going with the Bengals, except he's going with the Bills. I just like Joe Burrow and company. This is a Sunday night football game. Bills, like you said earlier in the podcast, very wishy-washy, inconsistent. We don't know who we're going to get. Bengals are hitting their stride. So, yeah, I like the Bengals.
Yeah, yeah, I think the Bengals looked excellent last week against the 49ers. Um, and I think the 49ers is kind of a discussion for another day as far as their season and how it's going, but the Bengals I think are really turning their season around. They're finally getting some momentum here. I think this is the kind of game they wanted at home against, a tougher opponent, but I think a very beatable team in their conference. So, yeah, I like the pick.
So now moving on to the double downs. Zeke's double down He's back to his same old stuff. The Eagles over the Cowboys. We got a 2-2 split here. Also, we have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 2-2 splits this week, which is insane. Zeke and I are going with the Eagles, and you and Sean are going with the Cowboys. I just think that I think Byard might be playing a little bit. I think this is an offense that you can afford to kind of play, make a few mistakes in, because I don't think it's going to bite him in the butt too much. But we'll definitely see how well that Eagles offense can move on the Cowboys, because they couldn't really do too much to the Jets, and I think the Jets are the closest to this Cowboys defense.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say on this matchup. I think if you basically want to hear my opinion on how this game will go, you can rewind and kind of, hear my analysis on the two teams and how they compare. But the only thing I'm gonna say is if the Eagles play this like every other game, it's not gonna be pretty. They can't keep this one close, I don't think. Especially, you know, playing a divisional opponent like the Cowboys, I don't think you can keep this one close. I think if they're going to win, it's going to have to be, a proper win, a win by multiple scores.
Yep. My double down for the week, I'm going with the Browns over the Cardinals. The funny thing is I made that pick last night. Uh, And now that the fact that they traded away Josh Dobbs, I think that makes that even for sure. If I could do a triple down, this would be it. Um, yeah, I like the Browns here, and we all agree here that the Browns are going to be taking this one.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, I mean, they lost their quarterback that they've pretty much depended on floating their season, and even then, they've lost a lot of games this, second, I guess not second half of the season, but second half of the first part of the season, you could say, the last 4 or 5 weeks, they've really committed to the tank job. So I don't think that's really going to change much. I mean, Cardinals are a competitive team. I like what they've done this year. I like their coaching staff, but they just don't have the talent. And to be honest with you, I don't really think they want to really win either. So
Yeah, Sean's double down is the Colts over the Panthers. Panthers just picked up their win this last week, but the Colts, they have um, Jonathan Taylor back. He's starting to look kind of like the Jonathan Taylor that we saw 2 years ago. I believe he had almost 100 yards this last week, if not, did have 100. Um, and we all agreed that the Colts should take this one. The Texans just kind of played one of their worst games of the season this last week, and I think that that's why the Panthers got their first win.
yeah. I mean, I'd be very surprised if the Panthers, went on a 2-game win streak and really were feeling themselves. I think the Colts, with their running back duo, with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, kind of elevating themselves. Gardner Minshew not playing too bad these last couple weeks. Um, Obviously, he could have played better this last weekend, but the game before that he played pretty well. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously Gardner Minshew's backup talent, but he's very hot and cold. When he gets going, gets streaky, he can have a really good game. And I just don't see the Panthers really putting up much of a fight.
Yep. So that wraps up the upsets and double downs. We'll just go on to the picks. Starting with the Thursday night football game here. We got the Titans and the Steelers. PT, you and I going with the Steelers. Zeke and Sean are going with the Titans. I just think that, uh, as much as I think that the Falcons defense is better than the Titans, especially with Kevin Byard being gone, um, I just don't think that the Titans offense is going to be able to move on the Steelers like they did against the Falcons. So that's why I'm going with the Steelers. I could expect this to be probably like a 13-10 kind of game, low scoring.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree pretty much with everything you said. I mean, I think the biggest thing about that Titans Falcons game is that every time they scored, it wasn't in short yardage, it was a deep ball. And I feel like if you just have an effective pass rush and you don't let DeAndre Hopkins have 3 touchdowns behind you and get behind you like that, you won't really have to worry so much. If you make Will Levis try to make plays in between, the 10 to 15 yard markers, and make tough throws, it's going to make it a lot harder on him, especially with an effective pass rush with one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And the Falcons just don't have that. So, yeah, I see the defense. And not to mention that before that game, they didn't really have a game plan with what quarterback was going to be starting. But now they know that Will Levis is going to be the guy, and they have a week of tape over him. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot different.
Yep. Speaking of the Falcons, that's the next game we'll talk about. The Vikings Falcons. We all agree with the Falcons. What's the reasoning?
Their quarterback just went down. I don't see Justin Jefferson coming back. Their defense is not the greatest. It's not the worst, but I don't know, man. This game feels weird because I don't exactly know what they're doing with our quarterback situation. I will say on record that Heineke looked a million times better than Desmond Ridder. I think if they start Heineke, Bijan is fully healthy. Drake London, I'm a little less worried about being healthy, but he is questionable to play this weekend. Um, but I feel like if we can just utilize that run game how we should and just do our thing, then our defense will have a good bounce back game and not have, not let another backup quarterback just unload against us. And, Will Levis is better than a backup quarterback, at least going off the one game sample size that we're going off of, he's a better skill, he's a better arm talent for sure than a backup quarterback is. So, yeah, we can't we can't have 2 weeks where we let a defense or we let an offense, just totally, take the top off and just throw deep balls every touchdown basically. So yeah, I think it's if they don't do that and they don't make those mental mistakes, it, this should be, I feel like, one of the Falcons' more sure games down the stretch.
Yeah, especially with I don't even know. I don't even remember the guy's name who's going to be starting for the Vikings this week, but because it's not going to be Josh Dobbs. No way that he can learn the entire playbook in just a week. But he's probably
Probably
going to learn.
not.
He's probably going to learn like the plays in like 2 or 3 formations, and he might get some reps, especially once if the game gets out of hand and it's a 20-point game in the fourth quarter. Might as well just run those 3 formations and let Josh Dobbs try to do his thing.
Yeah, I just don't think they have any real deep threat that I'm too worried about. The only guy that we're gonna have to keep in check is KJ Osborne and TJ Hawkinson. And as long as we don't let KJ Osborne cook AJ Terrell, which would be terrible, then we should be fine.
Yeah. The next game, Commanders Patriots. We all agree that the Commanders should win this one. Commanders having two close games to the Eagles this year, but I don't think that that's why we're picking them. I think it's more so just the Patriots just do not look that good. They lost to the Dolphins last week. Just the Patriots just aren't doing good. That should have been the team that probably should have been selling at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the Commanders can keep Sam Howell upright, he'll be just fine against the secondary. They just allow way too many sacks. I think it's the most in the NFL. And when he's upright and you let him have time in the pocket, he's a good quarterback, but it's really hard to get in rhythm and get your reads going when you're getting sacked every other play. Or every other series, I should say. So, yeah, as long as they don't let this pass rush that really doesn't have many guys on it get loose, then they should be fine.
Yep. Next one, Seahawks and Ravens. We all agree that the Ravens should win this one. What's your reasoning on this one? Because this one was a tough one for me.
Yeah, honestly, man, it was a tough one for me too, but it just comes down to the quarterback play, and I know you're gonna hate that, but I just think that Lamar Jackson has been able to turn it up and look a lot better than he has in prior games, especially, I mean, it's all situational, but he's looked a lot like it looks like he's making decisions a lot faster than he has in other like last season or any games this season. Um, and yeah, it's sometimes their offense can really struggle, but I think Lamar Jackson is just the better quarterback, and I really haven't seen Geno Smith have a game yet where he looks like he earned that contract, or even a game where he looks similar to last year. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, I kind of felt the same way. Lamar has been starting to make the better decisions more frequently as well. And I just think that the Ravens have been just playing a little too good to fall to the Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks are the leader in the NFC West right now because they're 5-2, and the Niners are 5-3. So maybe just being in the division lead, they don't feel like they have that target on their back quite yet, so they don't need to ramp it up. So that's why I'm going with the Ravens. The last of the noon games is the Buccaneers Texans, and we have a 2-2 split here. And Zeke and I are going with the Texans. You and Sean are going with the Buccaneers. With the Texans, I just feel like, I like with what the Texans are doing. They stay in games. I don't think that there's been a game so far this year where they've really been like blown out. I don't think so. I think they've been competitive in every game. And the Buccaneers, like if they can stop or force Baker to make mistakes, because like the Texans were right there with the Falcons, and I feel like that they are a fairly kind of like comparable team to the Falcons, without the running back situation. Other than that, everything else kind of matches up to an extent. And the Buccaneers lost to the Falcons. The Texans lost to the Falcons, so I feel like this could be a really good game. I just think that the Texans at home can get the job done.
Man, if we had CJ Stroud, that'd be awesome. But yeah, as far as this game goes, to me, I just have the better defense winning. I think the Buccaneers defense has been pretty good against most teams they've played. And even the good teams they play, like the Bills, they've kind of leveled up a little bit, and they've come to play. So I think they're going to make it really tough on Stroud. I think Stroud will make some good plays. It'll be a competitive game, but the Buccaneers coming off back-to-back losses, I think they know that they're going to have to start winning some games if they really want to win this division, because if they start losing games, then they're going to go in a spiral, and they're not going to be able to come back before it's too late. So I think this is one they're going to want to grab for sure.
Yep. The next one, 325 game, the Giants and Raiders. We got another 2-2 split. PT, you and I going with the Raiders. Zeke and Sean are going with the Giants. Tell me why I'm not making a mistake.
If the Raiders can just put together a cohesive offensive game, they'll be fine. But that's really the thing that has thrown their season off, I feel like. I mean, I feel like obviously the Raiders defense isn't all real or anything, but at times they can look really good. They have one of the best pass rushers in the NFL with Max Crosby. I think the secondary is playing a little bit better than what people are probably giving them credit for at times. But I just feel like if you can make a game plan to stop Saquon, make Tyrod Taylor make plays, and then just put together a good offensive game plan when you have playmakers on the outside, then you should be able to win this game. And I just don't think the Giants are very good. So
Yeah, this was probably one of the better defensive games that the Raiders have played. They held the Lions to kicking 5 field goals, only gave up 2 touchdowns. And both of or I guess the touchdown pass being beyond 20 yards. They stopped this team on, I think they're one of the best third down teams in the NFL. And they only converted, I think, 4 or 5 of those third downs when they had, I think, like 15 opportunities. They're pretty dang close to it. So the defense really stepped up, including having a pick six. But the offense just couldn't get anything going. Less than 200 yards. I mean, the defense did give up 450 yards. It fell apart in the second half. I mean, you can't be out there for 40 minutes and give up less than 300 yards. That's your defense would have to be phenomenal at stopping the run and just letting them just keep running the ball. But yeah, I'm going to go with the Raiders here. I just don't have much hope for the Giants, and I do think that defensive game that the Raiders just played was good enough. Then the last game, the Monday Night Football game between the Jets and the Chargers, we have another 2-2 split, the last of it. PTU and I going with the Jets. They're going with the Chargers. I don't have too much faith and the Chargers. You know, they beat the Bears, but so what? I just think the Jets defense is going to just cause too much fits for this offense. I don't believe in Zach Wilson by any means, but I think that the Chargers are going to make one too many mistakes, whether it's holding onto the ball or maybe it comes down to Brandon Staley once again.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I just don't think the Chargers are ready for this defense. I mean, yeah, like you said, I mean, it's not like I'm a big believer in the Jets offense. It's just when you look at the comparative advantage of each team or the difference between the Jets offense going up against the Chargers defense and vice versa, the Jets just have the significant advantage, I feel like. So yeah, I just think the Jets are a better football team, better coach too. I like Robert Saleh.
Yep. So that wraps up our week 9 upsets, double downs, and picks. I guess PT, I'll ask you this. It's tight. There's 5 points separating Zeke to Sean, and we're kind of right there in the middle of it. A lot can happen, but we've noticed getting the double downs and upsets are very crucial because right now you got the best overall or you got the best record, but you're just a few points behind. So you're putting a lot of faith on the Saints here. I don't think you've doubled down on the Saints before, but every time that you've been
No,
picking the
definitely
Saints,
not. Definitely
so
not. But I like my picks this week. I'll be fine. I do have the best record, so I think that says something. But our points are pretty tight. I mean, our records are pretty tight too, for the most part. So, but I like my picks this week, so I think I'll be fine.
yeah. I mean, you can feel good about your picks more than you did 2 weeks ago because that was horrible for all of us. I don't know what we were thinking.
I
Maybe
mean,
it had,
honestly, no, I know what I was thinking. The Bills need to beat the Patriots. They need to beat the
yeah,
inferior team, and that's what that goes back to what we talk about. They just find ways to beat themselves.
exactly. So, um, but is there anything you need to add?
Nah, they uh,
Nah,
they got to start Taylor Heineke this week.
they need to.
They need to.
This is the must win. You got to stay on top
Yeah,
of the division.
yeah.
But once again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP. Follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. I've been Sam Holcroft.
Payton Thompson.
Thanks for listening.